Whoa, whoa, whoa. You just clicked on the Meaningful People podcast episode. Yes, we got a sick, amazing episode for you with Rabbi Mendel Kalmanson. Before we get to that, which we're going to get there pretty quickly this week, you download the Pushka app like we do here at Meaningful People, and you give $1, you give $2, maybe $3. Go ahead, download the Pushka app at pushka.cc/meaningful. Anytime you're about to do something amazing in your life or something stressful or anything really, you give some tzedakah. That Pushka is in your pocket. Pushka.cc/meaningful. People, we are giving away something to people who comment on this episode. So go to YouTube, and right now you might see some pictures showing up. And that is the beautiful menorah at rodandflame.com. Rod and Flame. These most amazing menorahs, $500 to $1,000. These incredible menorahs. You know, the big ones standing on the floor up to the sky. Beautiful menorahs. That's one that you can have in your home just from commenting on this episode. Leave a comment here on YouTube, and we are going to choose one of you to win a beautiful menorah. We'll send it straight to you. But if you don't win, it's not a problem. You can too have Hanukkah this year. Head to rodandflame.com and purchase your menorah. You will love it. Your kids will love it. It is a beautiful piece to have in your home. Now you're going to go ahead and enjoy this episode with Rabbi Mendel Kalmanson. It is such a treat. Stick it through the whole thing. You're going to love it. The stories in here are amazing. And I just want to mention to make sure to leave that comment below right now. Leave that comment and you can win big. Enjoy. You are listening to the Meaningful People podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people. We are joined by Reb Mendel Kalmanson.
Harav!
All the way from the UK.
Indeed.
So, tell us where you grew up. You didn't grow up in London, did you?
No.
Where'd you grow
give
up?
it away.
Nachi jumping in on that aspect.
What gave it away is not the accent, I guess.
There you go. So, I'm born and raised in New Haven, Connecticut.
Nice.
Yeah.
They have the best pizza in the world, supposedly.
That's
Do they?
That's you know about that.
Very new thing.
Dave Portnoy did a.
One bite, you know the
Oh,
rules.
really?
He did. Yeah,
Not a
right?
kosher pizza shop.
Not kosher. New Haven. What was the score?
No, but it's the pizza capital.
New Haven style pizza is like
Wow.
the
That's his number one?
Wow, I didn't know what New Haven was famous for.
Well, every Jewish guy would say that. He gave what's the place in Brooklyn?
Pizza
Time. But he didn't. I mean, he gave 8.2. But to us, 8.2 is a 10. But
Pizza Maven, by the way, your brother, you asked your brother in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Shout out. Thank you for connecting us.
For sure.
nice.
Ask him how good Pizza Maven is.
Okay.
The Maven Yoven.
So you grew up in New Haven. Were your parents in Shlichus there?
Yeah, so my father's quite a well-known Rosh Yeshiva. He has written many svarim, Kovetz Shishim Ashirim. He was born and raised in an area of France called Brunois. Maybe you've heard of it. It's like the Oxford of Chabad. It's a very high-level yeshiva, very special place. That's where essentially most of the big Rosh Yeshivas in Lubavitch come from. Many, if not most. And there were some great, great mashpiyim and Rosh Yeshivas, the Goldberg family, the Volshansky family, the Lobkovsky family, the Nemanah family. And so my father's actually an identical twin. And his father is today the Rosh Yeshiva in Brunois. And he's written many svarim called Meital Amasecha Shabbos. So yeah, I grew up in a beautiful, idyllic, very quiet, very off the radar New Haven.
Oh,
Today,
you
New
mean
Haven
you weren't
is
like loud
American.
and partying in New Haven? Like what?
I mean that the community of then is very different to the community today. Today you have hundreds and hundreds of families. that
Really?
moved in, but at the
Isn't
time,
our,
maybe
we
30
have a cousin
families.
there? No. Hadakov?
Yeah, Yassi used to. He used to be in New Haven. I think he's moved since, but he was based near
New
West.
Rochelle, maybe? Yeah. Moved to Florida, right? Yeah,
lovely.
New Haven. He was in New
Special guy,
Haven.
Yassi Chadaka, wonderful
Yeah,
guy.
good people.
So that was New Haven. I left home very early. I left when I was 10. For chinuch purposes, I used to take the train, the Metro North to Grand Central, both in and out.
Daily?
Weekly.
Weekly, okay.
I stayed with family. I went to study in Alatera, the famous yeshiva on Eastern Parkway. And, you come back for Shabbos, go back to the city, and so on and so forth. So that's
a crazy thing to do at 10 years old.
Yeah.
That's really young.
Yeah.
Not highly recommended. It's very,
How was
very
what was your experience like?
It was interesting. Look, I was coming from a very quiet type of sleepy town, provincial, ghetto, and then straight into like Alatera, like, survival of the fittest.
And Grand Central also along the way.
It was great. But you know what? I literally can say that it transformed me to some extent into some of the character traits that I have today were definitely developed.
But that's like, isn't that something that a lot of families in Shlichus end up doing? No,
100%.
they send out their kids at a very young age.
100%. In fact, many of them actually study online, which is even more challenging because you don't have any physical contact with your teacher, with your.
So you were lucky.
Chabad.
You were a
I was
train
lucky.
right away.
That's considered lucky. But I will say,
We sit here. I just want to give context. We sit here. We can feel the Ar Chayzer from the Kinnis HaShluchim, which is going to be
exactly right
in a few days.
Yeah.
Which
is that what brings you to?
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Also to do a few events around the new book. But actually, for many of the Tzirei Shluchim, for many of the children of Shluchim, this is their opportunity to meet their classmates once a year.
Really?
This is their opportunity to meet their teacher once a year.
It's a class reunion.
Absolutely. It's not even a reunion. It's a class union.
Very deep.
Because, unfortunately for them, they're really...
But like that's kind of, and we're very close with Rabbi Mendel Kalmanson.
He's amazing.
He's
their friend.
I was actually talking to him last week, and unfortunately he had to go to Israel for the Levi of Tzvi Kogan. But he's back here now, and he's getting ready for the Kinnis, and obviously this is the first year he's doing the Kinnis without his father.
100%.
It's his first roll call. It's gonna be an emotional Kinnis, I imagine.
Very much so. And actually, I'd love to take the opportunity to express a deep hakar to Rabbi Moshe. He was a legend. I'm sure you knew.
Yeah.
And actually, it's not typical, but in my case, he was the one who made the shidduch between my wife and I and London. It's a bit of a long story, but usually a shliach sets out, they pave their own path, they find the location, they do all the legwork,
really?
the homework,
I thought they send you. I thought they...
No. You find a place, and then you reach out to the local shliach to see if he's okay with it, to see what are the demographics, is there space for another shliach? And with that okay, then you come down under the auspices and the jurisdiction, so to speak, of the local head shliach. In my case, it was quite different. I would open a shul in Crown Heights called the Besh Center. It was
Best. Well, so thank you, Hashem, take it from you.
It was...
Should have copyrighted that,
Listen, who knows?
It wasn't the back of the wagon. It was just the best.
It was great. It was very special. And then Rabbi Katlarsky, and actually Mendy was, his great credit, Mendy was the one who sort of headhunted me, if you will. And he said, Mendel, are you looking for Shlichus, typical Shlichus? I said, yes. We got into a little bit. And a few days later, Rabbi Moshe invited me to his office. And at the time, he had a very close friend, Gennady Boголubov, is a famous Ukrainian oligarch who was very instrumental in helping Chabad worldwide. Mm-hmm. And he basically was looking to create a warm, vibrant community in the heart of central London where, let's just say, there isn't much Jewish infrastructure. Our Chabad house, just to put it in perspective, is on the street of Buckingham Palace.
Oh, wow.
Sorry. Buckingham Palace is on the street of our Chabad house. So to give you a sense. And so I really am forever grateful to Rabbi Katlarsky, both Rabbi Moshe, Rabbi Shalom, and Yibadal Chaim Tovim, Mendy.
It's something that I don't think people knew. I don't know. I thought that, and when the Rebbe was with us and sending people physically on Shlichus, would the Rebbe designate a place for someone, or it would be the same way? They found where they want to go. Yeah. So if let's say I was Chabad, I am Chabad. If let's say I was going to Shlichus, I am a Shlichus. Let's say I was going to physical Shlichus in a Chabad
Let's say
house.
I wanted to move to Bermuda.
Sorry, it's taken.
But let's say I would go to somewhere in Bermuda and a Shliach there, and I say, hey, I want to come here also and help you with your efforts. And that Shliach says, sure, please come. That's how a Chabad house gets formed?
That's how it's formed today, because today there's such a saturation of Chabad houses. But back in the day, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you could choose a continent, perhaps. You could choose a country. There were cases where the Rebbe for sure directed people where they needed to go. Mm-hmm. That's for sure the case. But that was few and far in between. In the main, the Rebbe would actually encourage people to do their own research so that it resonates with their nefesh. They would choose either one or multiple locations, and often the Rebbe would circle one.
Really?
And, it's amazing. There are so many stories because I've researched this topic and many others. To the Rebbe, it was essential. It was essential that you wanted to go where you were going. Mm-hmm. There could be no dissonance. There could be no compulsion. There could be no imposing. The Rebbe saw that as anathema, antithetical to the whole notion of Shlichus, and there are many stories where the Rebbe sent his secretary, Rabbi Chodakov, to ask a younger man if he's ready to go a certain place. And if there was any reservation, he would say, okay. And then if they came back understanding, discerning that it had come from the Rebbe, and they said, oh, for sure we want to go, he'd say, it's too late. The ship has sailed.
Wow.
If you didn't want to go, then it's not for you.
So
there's something very deep, and it's actually connected to the theme of this new book on purpose, where part of our purpose is actually rejoicing in our purpose. It's quite a deep point.
That is deep. We're definitely going to get there. We have a few books to plow through first.
Well, before I got married, actually,
I want to ask you about when you received the phone call from Moshe Kolarski inviting you to his office. Is that the equivalent of getting called up to the big leagues? Like, dude, like this is it. We're getting
I had no idea what he wanted, honestly.
It makes the big leagues.
Yeah, really.
It makes the big leagues look like AAA.
Yeah.
But it's very powerful. He was an incredible human being.
What was that meaning like?
So he sits down, he tells me, look, Mendel, I want to offer you a shlichus. Again, this was very atypical. Not only is it atypical, I'll share with you a little interesting story. Like maybe months earlier, I'd sat with my wife and we were just doing a thought exercise and sort of dreaming up the perfect kind of shlichus. And the perfect kind of shlichus for a Chabad younger man is a place where there is already built-in support. There's one or multiple individuals who will say, we'll cover this, we got this. All you have to do is teach, is connect, is create programming. So we're dreaming this up. And then literally months later, Rabbi Kotlarski invites me and he says, look, I have a good friend. This particular Nadav, he was a very generous man. He started the Simcha Fund, if you remember, where he would send checks to all the shluchim for bris, for bar mitzvah, for weddings. An amazing concept. He recognized that when a shliach fundraises, the first place the funds go to is to support the work. And sort of if there's extras, then moishus, then it goes to the personal. And for this reason, he's thought that there's a gap over here in the personal lives of shluchim. And he said, I want to close that gap.
Wow.
Beautiful. So he created the Simcha Fund. And he gave tens of millions of dollars to this cause. So this is that individual. So Rabbi Kotlarski says, this so-and-so lives here. He told me, I thought he had said Belgrade. So I said, I'm going to have to speak to my wife about that. He had said Belgravia, which is a neighborhood in central London, which is extremely posh and very unique as it happens. But anyhow, he looked at me and says, you need to ask your wife. You know? So,
that's so funny. I have to ask my wife if before I go to the grocery. You decide you're going to move to central London. He didn't even ask.
So Baruch Hashem, it worked out. So we did a little trial. We came to Central, and we were told by some of the locals who were very cynical, if you're looking for Jews, stay in Brooklyn, don't come to Belgravia.
Oh, that's not nice.
That was just their realistic diagnosis. What
Jews
they don't
told
know,
you that or not?
Yeah.
Oh,
like, what they didn't realize is that if any shluchim took into account the realistic, predictions of the experts and the pundits, they wouldn't move anywhere.
Yeah, it never adds up. It never computes on a spreadsheet.
Never. So, well, we did come, so Simchas Torah, we did an event at the local hotel. It's a very Lanesborough hotel, for those who know. And 150 people showed up out of the woodwork. And we were like, you know what? We're here to stay. And we never looked back.
That's amazing. How long have you been there?
13 years.
Wow.
13 years. And Baruch Hashem, this Yom Kippur, we have Sfardim and Ashkenazim. So once a year, we do two separate minyanim with chazanim and choirs. We had over 1,000 Yidden, Baruch Hashem.
Wow. And this is near Buckingham Palace?
Yeah, literally on the street, right next to the Peninsula Hotel. For those who know, we have a daily minyan. We have a kosher shop, the first of its kind in Central London. We have a Sunday school. We have team programs, young professional programs, shiurim. It's Baruch Hashem.
Let me ask you, I imagine that over the last year, maybe it's not so geschmack in really all over Europe, but what's it been like in London?
Look, I think you're absolutely right. Everywhere in the world, there has its own manifestation and iteration of anti-Semitism. London's is unique. So they have the big protests. They're very unpleasant, very uncomfortable. They weren't weekly. There were about 17, 18 of them. Only 2 of them marched past our Chabanas. But the police were very much in touch with us and we were very prepared. And they were generally contained, although of course there was a lot of pockets of hostility within. And the policy of the police is containment. And Baruch Hashem, it seems like looking back, it worked very well. Otherwise, on a day-to-day basis, I don't feel the impact whatsoever. We live in a very civilized, a very high-end part of town. And even, all kinds of people from all around the world live there. So whatever kinds are there are usually very civilized. But I'm not trying to downplay the real anti-Semitism that has resurfaced. The current government has taken positions we're very unhappy with, etc. But again, you look around the world, sadly, this is where we are.
We'd be remiss if we didn't, ask you about your thoughts, your feelings, what happened in the UAE as a Shliach. Obviously, the last time something like this happened was, we know nothing's a coincidence, and this irony is, it was Tzvi's uncle through marriage was Gabriel Holtzberg. It happened in Mumbai, which is honestly the yard site is next week. I think it's
exactly
Aleph Kislev, no?
Exactly.
So that's the last time I believe something like this ever happened. And as a Shliach, when you find something like that out, what goes through your mind?
First and foremost, we're absolutely crushed. There's no words, There's no words. We're a family. And when one part of your family is taken, all of you shudders, all of you is deeply, it's excruciating. And, in times like this, there's very few words you can't say. It's not even a time for words. At the same time, the Rebbe's message, and I actually wrote a book on this called The Time to Heal, which has the Rebbe's response to loss and tragedy. Extremely powerful perspectives. Mamish, the Rebbe's teachings are so healing and so redemptive and so empowering. And at times like this, we know Chabad is not new to tragedies. Am Yisrael is not new to tragedies. And there was a terrible massacre. Then the Rebbe addressed it. It was in Kfar Chabad. It almost actually closed down the whole experiment called Kfar Chabad. And after a few days, yeah, after a few days, when the Rebbe was in his office, the Rebbe didn't come out. The Rebbe didn't address it, which in itself is a deep hira. That the first instinct when it comes to tragedy is not to go and speak and try to encourage and try to, comfort. That's not your role. You be there for the people in need. But only days after, the Rebbe sent a few words, and those words transformed Kfar Chabad and transformed the mantra and the philosophy and the reaction of Chabad to tragedy. And you'll see this actually lie there, unfortunately, at every tragedy. You'll see this kind of theme, this kind of motif. Through continued building, that's how you will achieve comfort. So that's the only comfort we might take, that in the merit and the memory of Rabbi Tzvi alav Shalom, millions of mitzvahs will be done around the world. New Chabad houses will be opened. There will be greater engagement, and Yidden will come closer to Hashem as a result of his neshama. And why his neshama had to leave in this way, that's way above our pay grade.
Wow.
The only thing what we do in these moments, and the Rebbe was very clear on this, is we demand of Hashem ad masai. The Rebbe said it's not our place to be the Eibishter's defense lawyer or to justify pain in the world. To the contrary, our place is to learn from the greatest of the greats, to learn from Avram Avinu, to learn from Moshe Rabbeinu, that in the face of pain, our only response is ad masai. Genug shoyim. We've been through all the pain we need to, and now it's time for the next chapter.
Wow.
The Rebbe there's a whole chapter in the book, A Time to Heal, where the Rebbe was reacting to other Gedolei Yisrael who unfortunately used the opportunities of vulnerability of Am Yisrael, for example, before the 6-Day War, and again later on before the Gulf War, to talk about how the Jewish people are deserving, I can't even say the words, right, of greater chub and b'chulu because of the Averis and the Eibusher sits and counts the Aver. This rhetoric, I'm telling you, I'll say something maybe a little bit provocative, but the way to really understand someone's nefesh is to see what activates them, to see what gets them. The Gemara already says that a shemetz of this, a shemetz, really in the most edel way possible. If you wanted to see what mattered most to the Rebbe, all you had to do was speak out against that. And if you spoke out against a Yid, that's a cardinal line. If you would talk about Yidden in a way that was harsh, that was judgmental, that was denigrating, you were sure to get the most incredible response from the Rebbe. And in fact, some of the most beautiful sichas, and I include them in the books, where the Rebbe extols the virtues of a Yid in and of himself or herself, etc., the apple of the Eibusher's eye, the only child of the Eibusher, the Rebbe quoting the Baal Shem Tov, etc. All of those came in response to moments like this when other Gedolim came out against Am Yisrael and used, unfortunately, very derogatory, even hateful language to describe Jewish people who are not yet engaged with Yiddishkeit and so forth. So in times like that, the Rebbe spoke so strongly about Hayitachin and Rahman al-Islam that we should utter words that somehow justify something that happened to another Yid or something that could happen to other Yidden. I'll share something that's very little known. In Positivity Bias, there's a chapter about the use of language. It's called Lashon Tov. I developed this theory that the opposite of Lashon Hara is not non-Lashon Hara, but it's Lashon Tov. Right? In other words, if you live your whole life just not speaking Lashon Hara, unbelievable. Mamish, unbelievable. But imagine if we could replace that vacuum or that natural instinct to put down, replace that with expressions of lifting up. So you see it, it's amazing if you watch the Sunday Dollar videos, 1 minute after. To each person, the Rebbe had a word of empowerment. To Rav Kaduri, the Kabbalist Rebbe said, your name comes from Kadur, which means your impact no longer is local, it has to become global. To a Chassid whose name was Uziel, the Rebbe says, your name is Uziel, that means you have strength, and therefore you have to use your strength, and the Rebbe directed him how to use his strength. To the Shliach in somewhere in Texas, the Rebbe said, you stand at the place Zeh Shara Shamayim, because the rockets go up, right? Turning a place of technology or whatever into a place that's the interface between heaven and earth. And we can go on and on. So the Rebbe was particular about not using the word Holocaust. People don't know this. The Rebbe would say,
I never saw that. I've seen the Rebbe speak in video of a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever heard the Rebbe reference the Holocaust.
This is how he did. He would say the Azoi Gerufene, the so-called. One of the reasons for this is here's where there's speculation. Okay. I think it's very important to draw the line. That was what we saw.
You called it the so-called?
The so-called. Azoi Gerufene.
Okay.
There were times where for clarity's sake, he used it in a letter to someone who wasn't. But otherwise, we see this expression, azay gerufene. Why? Again, this is my own. If you look up the etymology, the history, the context of the word Holocaust, it actually means an animal offering or sacrifice that was burnt completely. The equivalent lahavdil in our tradition of a oila, carbon oila. So perhaps Rebbe didn't want to refer to Am Yisrael as a carbon oila. Because Baruch Hashem, 2/3 survived, and how they survived, they turned tragedy into triumph. We have the greatest resurgence of Jewish life takes place in the decades. The relocation of Yiddishkeit to Kader HaTachten, as Rebbe referred to it, to America and so on. But perhaps also because the Rebbe wanted to distance himself and distance Am Yisrael from even tenuously linking what happened during World War II and the deaths of 6 million Yidden to some kind of offering, to some kind of cosmic or spiritual justification or value. There was no meaning whatsoever from our point of view in what took place at that time. And therefore, our only response must be ad masai. That's
we can't think like, oh, it was a lesson to teach us. It was a
lesson. It was deserved, as others have suggested. It was because of Chil Shabbos and the Treifus and all of that. Rahman al-San. That's something the Rebbe would again and again say is not our place. To the contrary, in so doing, if a person does make that link, they become an accessory to those horrors. They are justifying those horrors, and that's the very opposite of what a Yid should be doing. We should all, like Avram Avinu, be standing up and asking the Eibusher, where's the justice? Yeah. Of course, respectfully, of course, the greatest act of faith comes when we ask, right? Because we know there's truth, we know there's emes, we know there's a reason, but it's cosmic, it's hidden. And so long as it's hidden, we say to Hashem, it's painful. Let's get rid of this. Let's move to a different kind of trajectory, a different phase.
I'm taking a lot of nechama, of consolation, from what you're sharing in the juxtaposition of the Rebbe's stages of responses, where stage one is silence. And then what was sort of gnawing at me was, okay, so how long does that period of silence last? And then what are we saying? Like, we say ein milim, there are no words, but then all of a sudden words are appropriate. And what I'm hearing from you in the Rebbe's sort of second stage after that period of silence, to sort of just let it sink in, is weiter, not words. It's weiter action.
100%.
And building. And
100%.
Words are never the response.
Unless those words are healing, because that's an action. Mm-hmm. Again, right? Words for the sake of words, the Rebbe had little patience for. But words that were in as a maisa, right? That they're moyel, then it's a different story. You know, what's very, very interesting when I was researching that book is that every time the Rebbe suffered a personal tragedy, he took that tragedy and he turned it into a new mitzvah, a new initiative, a new campaign. After his mother passed away, he started the famous Rashi Shlichus, which I imagine you're familiar with. Came with a whole new way of looking at a Rashi. That was the Rebbe's response to the loss of his mother. When he lost his father, Reb Leivik, what did he do? He started Tiferes Lev Yitzchak. Colels for elderly individuals, stipends where they're paid to learn Torah, to create community and a sense of ongoing purpose. Unbelievable. When the Rebbetzin, 30 days after Rebbetzin passed away, the Rebbe starts the Mivtza Yom Holedes, the birthday campaign, turning a moment that really emphasized the absence of life into a launch pad for the greatest Mivtza celebrating the presence of life. Think about that for a moment. I can give you many, many such examples. Every time there was a loss, there was a tragedy, initially, Vayidam Aaron, silence, because you can't speak, you can't express, you can't manifest. Right then and there, you have to stand and observe and just be there. And be there for others who are going through that if it's in their case. But afterwards, the Rebbe believes, in my understanding, that a loss creates a vacuum. There's an energy there, and if you suppress it, it doesn't go away. It stays there, and unfortunately, at some point, it will manifest, it will excavate in a deeply toxic and unhealthy manner. Instead, the Rebbe taught, take that energy and channel it, harness it, it's fuel. And you see this. You see this in Am Yisrael as a nation, and you see this within every one of our communities. We saw it after October 7th. The way that healing comes is when you take a life that was lost and you transform that into a symbol of new life, of light, of redemption.
But we're seeing that really immediately after what just happened last week in United Arab Emirates, where Rabbi Levi Duchman, the head Shliach in the UAE, said that they're going to open up base tzvis, and then almost immediately at the same time, you have Jared Kushner, Ivanka and Josh Kushner and Carly Kloss. They each donated $1 million
Yeah.
to Chabad UAE to build
100%.
more.
100%.
It's quite literally what you are
Literally.
saying.
Again, take a note. Please God, there will never be any more tragedies for Am Yisrael. Please God, go back in history and you'll see on every occasion that was the Rebbe's calling. So the way I put it in the book is that the Rebbe taught that there's no explanation for a tragedy, but there is a response. And this is our response.
Does that
You
also,
saw a video, remember the video of Rabbi Moshe Kadlarsky after Mumbai? You saw there's a 1 minute clip.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
We made that clip.
You saw it. It's just from you. But by the way,
Full circle, Nachi.
Yeah.
now you see it's the knee-jerk reaction of every shliach. That is the default.
Yeah.
That's the instinct. Where does it come from? That's the point. That's really what I set out to do in these books.
You know,
to try
it's
to
also the-
collate these ideas to show you what's the curriculum of thinking, what's the special sauce in which Chabad Shliach marinate, where's the intellectual incubator. And when you go to the Rebbe's Torah and you observe how the Rebbe acted in real time, what we call Ma'aser Rav, that's where the Hadracha comes. And that's why when someone asks, how could Chabad continue to proliferate? It's very simple. We have a Rebbe. Of course, there's the Neshama of the Rebbe, but there's also the Torah of the Rebbe. There's the Hadracha, there's the Hashkafa. And that's literally my mission and my mission statement, which is to take those teachings and maintain and preserve their integrity, but also relate them in accessible manners that people should be able to also be touched by that and embody those teachings in their own lives.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I stay just on that Nakuda for a moment? Because you're right in it. I think there's a misconception, and we like to amplify people's unique position to shed light on topics. I think you are uniquely positioned to shed light on the misconception. Let's talk about positivity bias for a moment. And I believe that there's a misconception where people misconstrue the positivity bias to be ignorant and in denial and unaware of pain, and to hide their head in the sand and to sort of ignore tragedy. And that's erroneous.
It's beyond erroneous. In fact, in the introduction to positivity bias, I felt it was imperative to touch on this point. Because, the Rebbe didn't live a life of privilege and peace and comfort. Let's be very real. The Rebbe lived through World War I, World War II, a terrible typhus epidemic, a refugee crisis in Ukraine. The Rebbe's own father was stolen from him, stolen from his family, was tortured by the Soviets, was forcibly exiled to Kazakhstan, where eventually he died due to his illness, due to the torture. The Rebbe wrote, and this is not well known, the Rebbe wrote to his father, I will never forgive myself for not doing more to get you out. Remember, when is the Rebbe talking about? A time period when the Rebbe himself was on the run and barely escaped with his life. He got the last tickets out of the south of France on the Turbo Pinto to Lisbon, and that itself was miraculous. And yet, that was something the Rebbe carried with him throughout his life. The Rebbe's own brother was murdered by the Nazis in Dnepropetrovsk. His grandmother was murdered by the Nazis, his brother-in-law, his sister-in-law. We could go on and on.
Rebbe didn't have any children.
That's another point that I touch on. People don't realize. The Rebbe, the very Rebbe who blessed tens of thousands to have children himself due to reasons that we cannot fathom, wasn't blessed by the Eibusha with physiological children. Parenthetically, there's a story in my family with Rabbi Colel, who we know, a special neshama, a special yid. He has a beautiful minyan in Hancock Park called Beis
Wow.
Medrash. Unbelievable. And he's bringing a lot of healing in the addiction space. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He should be on this. He should be interviewed.
Him and his partner, Alicia.
Unbelievable.
LA
Alicia
Yidden are getting shout outs galore today.
They're highly
They deserve
Stand
it.
up, LA guys.
They deserve it. City of Angels.
Yeah.
So when my mother had 4 children, and then for 5 years she couldn't have children, the doctor said, enjoy the 4. And she I think, had resigned herself. And then one Sunday, and you could see this on the video, you can see it on video, we had a babysitter at the time who had cancer. And my mother comes by the Rebbe and she asks the Rebbe for a bracha for the babysitter. The Rebbe gives her $1 and says, this is for the baby. So my mother, you can see, she's very confused. Like, she had asked for the babysitter. So she clarified, I mean the person who looks after the babies. This is for the baby. In the year, Yikusil was born.
Wow.
Oh
And
my
5
gosh,
years
chills.
later, my brother Maishi was born. $2, 2 babies.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, the doctor said it was.
Can you send us that video?
What?
Can you send us
Sure.
that video?
I'm
We're
going to
show it.
send
We're
it to
going to
you.
show it right now. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Think about that. That's 1 second of the hundreds of hours, if not more, of people going by. You know how many miracle stories? So that's a tzaddik. 1 word, channeling from Umayla. I know you said, by the way, sadly, the babysitter didn't make it. The Rebbe sensed that wasn't.
Xera.
It was a Xera. But now channel. What? I'm writing. Someone's before me. How can I channel? What can I draw forth for this person?
I mean, what positive? What positive can I give?
Yeah, you're actually reframing the story, which is deep, very powerful, and that's what happens in that moment. By the way, we're sitting here. He has a life. He has a family. He is touching thousands of people, literally. All of that from one word. This is for the baby. It's mind blowing. So, but back to the Rebbe for a moment. So the Rebbe lived through the Rebbe carried the pain, the anxieties, the fears of millions of people. Professor Susan Handelman from Bar-Ilan University says that at a time the Rebbe was receiving over 400 letters a day, to which he responded to most of them. In addition to 3 nights a week, spending, as you know, through Yechidus, sometimes from 9, 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning, meeting people. And Shabbos, there's a misconception that Lubavitch, Shlichus, obviously, Shabbat, Torah, Which other community do you have a Rebbe teaching Torah to the entire community for 6 hours, 7 hours on a Shabbos? I'll never forget, I once heard from Yossi Jacobson, Rabbi Yossi Jacobson, the great, really very, very special neshama. I'm sure you know him very well. Someone I look up to, I hope to emulate in many respects, also in teaching Rebbe's Torah. He was oral scribe of the Rebbe, Chazer.
For anyone that doesn't know, that is Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson.
Yeah, sorry. I should have started that
only real Lubavitchers call him Yossi.
Maybe Gula Loilam, for anyone that doesn't know.
Right. That's only because of his accessibility, because he's so warm.
I'm pretty sure most people didn't know he was Yossi. I would go like Yosef Yehuda maybe, or Yosef Yitzchak.
Yeah.
It's not Yosef Yitzchak?
It is actually.
Oh, so it's Yossi.
Yossi is a nickname of Yosef Yitzchak.
Okay, wow, okay.
There you go. So he says that...
Is that dumb? Yeah, okay.
There's a 3-day Yom Tif, he said, if you were to transcribe, take the Rebbe's Farbrengens and turn them into transcripts, he said, you know how many pages you would come to? Between 200 and 300 pages. That's the amount of Torah the Rebbe would share on any given 2 and 3 day Yom Tif. This is, so you think about
and they know because they were the oral scribe.
Oh yeah, that was all they were doing. They were holding on to the Rebbe's words. So back to the Rebbe. The Rebbe let all of this, so 400 letters a day. What do you think most of those letters were saying? They weren't saying, Rebbe, I just had a baby. Or Rebbe, my business is going lahavli. I don't know what to do with my feet. No. They were saying, but unfortunately, this child has the and my business is farfallen and all. Parenthetically, I didn't include in positive advice because I came across this after, but there was someone who once came to the Rebbe, and I later saw the Rebbe said this a lot of times, and the Rebbe said, what's happening with this particular challenge that you raised some months ago? He said, Baruch Hashem, it worked out. The Rebbe said, then why didn't you tell me?
Wow.
The Rebbe said, I have 2 drawers in my desk. One of them is for all the tzaras, and the other one is for all the psuras tevis. He said the one with tzaras is overflowing. The one with psuras tevis is unfortunately empty. And the Rebbe would stress, and this is a murdika letter my father-in-law shared with me. The Rebbe basically told to someone who was going through a very difficult thing, I told you in the past to be mavaser toiv. I told you. And the Rebbe didn't spell it out so strongly, but my takeaway from this was, had you been mevaser toiv, you wouldn't have been in this situation. You wouldn't need to come into contact for challenges, for tzaras. And elsewhere, and in Positivity Advice, I did share this idea, that the Rebbe says the keli for new bracha is to first express hakaras toiv for the brachas that you have. That way you create new vehicles and new vessels. So the Rebbe goes through an extremely difficult, by objective measures and objective standards, the Rebbe led a very, very challenging life, without a question. And so the basic premise of the book is that for the Rebbe, and this, look, when you're trying to research the Rebbe, you have a very difficult task, because the Rebbe shared so little about his private life. Like, you can count on 2 hands the amount of times the Rebbe spoke about personal things. Very, very little. And so, but there is one anecdote that I came across where he told his, a chassid, Rebbe Yunik, who was like a confidant to some degree. The Rebbe said to him that I've worked on myself to see things positively, because if I hadn't, I simply couldn't have survived.
Wow.
The reason that's so powerful is because what that says is you don't have to be a Lubavitcher Rebbe to see the world through a positive lens. And you don't have to be born with a so-called positive disposition or personality, and you don't have to live a life filled with only chesed, revealed good. No, positivity is a matter of perspective, not just personality. It's a matter of choice. It's not just a matter of circumstances. But if you go deeper, and this is really to your question, people ask me, is this a book about positive psychology? And I said, it's not a book about positive psychology, because positive psychology actually really works. There's a placebo effect. There's psychological benefits to seeing the world through a positive lens. Shimon Peres once said that both pessimists and optimists, they die the same death, but they live different lives. And the truth is they actually die different deaths, because research shows that people with a more positive outlook on life, they live between 11 and 15% longer. Think about it for a moment. If I came to the market tomorrow with a pill that extended your life by 11 to 15%, I'd be an international sensation.
Well, people think it's Ozempic.
Okay. that helps one component, but it doesn't help the entirety.
No, that's really amazing.
But think about that.
There's nothing that even claims that.
Where'd you research it? Like, how do you get that?
In the BBC, findings on the BBC quoted this research, but also it helps delay actually Alzheimer's and the decline of the mind.
Just from being positive.
Yeah. Now,
what does it look like practically? Like in what aspect of life? Every aspect of life, waking up and just...
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. But just to conclude on this one, so that's psychology, right? If you tend to see things in better light, you tend to be less anxious. Your immune system does better because you're therefore physiologically you do better. You sleep better. There's a lot of derivatives. There's a trickle down effect to having a positive mindset. But in reality, you could argue, yes, but you're not living in the real world. In other words, you're tricking yourself for very strategic aims, and it has a positive outcome. That's not the Rebbe's positivity. The positivity of the Rebbe is theological positivity. That's a very important distinction. Theological positivity means that this is how the Rebbe is explaining to us reality really is in its most real sense. You know what a Yid is? A Yid is a chelek alekami ma'amamish. What you're seeing is not the real Yid. It's not a game. This is not a farce. The Rebbe is saying you're just seeing something superficial. There was a famous story. Someone wrote to the Rebbe. He says, I decided I'm not going to shul anymore on Yom Kippur because I don't want to be a hypocrite, because every other day of the year I don't go to shul. The Rebbe said, the real natural place of a Yid, as the Rambam teaches us, that the real ratzon of a Yid is Avos Hashem, is Shmir Sater Mitzvah. So the real natural place of your soul is in shul. Hence, Rebbe says, you're not a hypocrite when you come to shul on Yom Kippur. You're a hypocrite every other day of the year when you don't.
Yeah.
We look at this and we marvel, like, oh, or we say a beautiful vart. It's poetic. No. To the Rebbe, that was literal. The way the Rebbe looked at history also, you have to think about it for a moment. Someone once said, how is the Rebbe so positive about history, about human affairs, about events in the world? So I'll never forget, there's someone I know who told me they have a very hard time reading books that are thrillers or things like that because they're just on so much spilkes throughout. So I just recommend it. So you read the end of the book. Okay.
My father does that.
Read the end.
He watches the end of movies and then
he goes back to it.
My wife also, she Googled how it ends.
There we go.
She can't deal with it.
But suddenly, not only can you deal with it, you're enjoying every twist of the plot. To my mind, the Rebbe saw the end of the book.
Wow.
The Rebbe saw the end of the movie. He knew how the story ends. To him, Yeshayahu, all the Nevi'im, when they talked about our world, Emir Hashem, the world that we hope to see, Tzamala, Rav L'Lechem, Tzamala Mayim Kim L'Shmayas Dvar Hashem. That was the reality the Rebbe lived in. This wasn't a false positive. This was genuinely the reality. So he helped elevate us to see things from that point of view. And when you do, everything else falls away because you see everything else as the facade. You see everything else as a superficial. And it's a deep, deep point. That's why if we can internalize, and that's the key word, we can actually emulate that in our own way.
We'll be right back to this episode. A quick word from my friends at Peasy. If you don't have the Peasy Deals app on your phone, you're missing out big time. This week I got an alert. Free trip to Europe. Run. I was like, what? Go onto the app. I run onto this thing and boom, you're waiting on a line and people won a free trip, a free flight to Europe. And that's something that you're missing out on if you don't have the Peasy Deals app. This time of year, this season, it's all about the deals. It's all about, whoa, did you see that price change? Yeah. Those heating lamps? Yeah. That washing machine? Yeah. That scooter? It's Hanukkah season. You're buying gifts for your kids. You don't go shopping anywhere without going on the Peasy Deals app and saying, is there a better price? Yankel, we don't got to spend that much money. We get the Peasy Deals app for free and we can spend less and get more. Never ever pay full price again. Download the Peasy Deals app right now. Hit the link in the show notes of this episode. Turn on those notifications, customize those notifications. Make sure to enter that raffle for a free car lease. Go right ahead. Peasy Deals app is the difference that you want in your life and save some money. This episode is also sponsored by my friends at A Time. They're having this amazing raffle, a family trip to Israel. Not just one person, not just two people, not just three people, 6. A trip for 6 people. You get 6 nonstop round trip tickets via El Al to Eretz Yisrael. If you want to think about what the value of that ticket is, take out your calculator. It's a lot. And you could buy a ticket for $54. You could buy 5 tickets for $180, 25 tickets for $500, and you're supporting an incredible cause. That is A Time. we've had on the founders of a time on our podcast. They do incredible work with those who are struggling with fertility. And now here's your time where you can give back to them. And here's a time where you can go to Eretz Yisrael, all 6 of you. So go ahead, buy your tickets today. Hit the link in the show notes of this episode, or you could buy these tickets at atimeisraeltrip.com. That is atimeisraeltrip.com. And not only are they paying for your flights, you get 6 nights stay in the Inbal, the beautiful hotel in Yerushalayim, a car rental for the entire trip. Guys, you don't want to miss out on this. Head to atimeisraeltrip.com. That is atimeisraeltrip.com and purchase your tickets. I've heard Rabbi Kalish say that when you see the good in somebody, we call it an ayin tov, right? You're seeing good. And the opposite is, and you see the bad, you say ayin ra. But he said, an ayin ra is not you're seeing bad in somebody. The ayin ra is you have bad eyesight because you're not seeing what's accurate.
Excellent.
You're seeing false. You're not seeing well. You need glasses.
That's what the negativity is, that your ayin
I like that.
is in the wrong spot.
I never saw that.
If you flip your perspective and you move your
100%.
ayin to the front of the word, then it becomes an einig. Your life becomes very
100%. 100%.
I want to, if you could confirm a story. I heard that maybe Rabbi Groner or one of the Gabayim by the Rebbe wanted to bring the Rebbe an envelope opener. It would open all the envelopes automatically. 400 letters a day. The Rebbe's opening each envelope. And the Rebbe said, many of these letters are closed with tears. How am I going to taste their tears if I don't open it
100%.
by hand?
I know who the story happened with.
Really?
It's a more involved story even.
Please evolve it. Because that's unbelievable.
I know what happened. It's actually an extended family member through marriage. Initially, the person said, I'm going to get you an electronic letter opener. So the Rebbe said, it makes too much noise. He tracked down the creator of this particular company, and he said, do you make them that don't make noise? So he said, we discontinued the model. It wasn't effective for whatever reason. He says, can I actually hire you to make one for a very important cause? He made it. He comes back to the Rebbe with this letter that doesn't make noise.
This is fire.
And that's when the Rebbe shared this part, which I think is itself a major limud. Initially, the Rebbe just didn't want to get into it. It's not the noise, not noise. What it was always about was that when a Yid closes a letter with tears, Rebbe says, how can I simply use something electronic to open it? I will miss out on reading between the lines, on reading the experience, the place where the person's coming from. So that's very... Look, the idea is even of limud schus. What's the word? It's limud. It doesn't say re'iyas schus. It doesn't say see the good. It says melamed. The same way you approach a sugya in Gemara, you harave on a toises on a marsha, you should harave it to be melamed, to discover, to recognize the schus in another. One of the most beautiful teachings I came across when I was researching positivity bias, and I did not see a source for it, which means it seems to me like it's a chiddush of the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, we're all familiar with the saying, mitoich shalei lishma ba lishma. In other words, if your person is doing the right thing for the wrong reason, we say continue to do the right thing for the wrong reason, because eventually your intentions will align with the action, and eventually you'll come to have the right intention too. The Rebbe says, let's look at the words. What does toich mean? The essence, the innermost, the core. Mitoich of the loy lishma is lishma. It's not something you have to wait to get to at some point. You have to evolve. You have to develop. No, if you only look deep into your own self and you recognize with that spiritual lens that we refer to your innermost essence, you would see the lishma. You're just unfortunately not yet in touch. So align yourself with your true self. Mamash. And this Rebbe's views on tshuva, in other words, it's not about becoming the new you. It's becoming the real you. Tashuv, come back to that pinteliyah, that neshama. That explains so much of the Rebbe's Weltanschein, the Rebbe's worldview. I'll share one little story on this one, which is so moving. And it's a story that I heard growing up. And I with the Rebbe's stories, it's very, very important to verify everything. So you'll see everything is footnoted. Everyone has a name. And so this story, I heard from a Shliach in Massachusetts. His name is Rabbi Alti Bukit. And it happened with him. He was once on the way to the countryside, to Catskills, wherever. And I'm not going to say all the details because some of it, let's get to the details that are relevant. A Satmar Chassid comes over to him and he says, no, what are you doing? He was learning a mimer. He was at a stop. His kids maybe were using the restroom. He says, you're a Lubavitcher. He says, yeah. He said, let me tell you a story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He said, many, many years ago, he said, my wife and I couldn't have children for 10 years. So we came to the Rebbe, to the Satmar Rebbe, and we asked for a bracha. And he gave a bracha like he used to give. And at that point, I was so desperate. I told the Satmar Rebbe, I said, we have a haftacha? So he said, if du willst haftacha, darfst gehen bei jenem.
Wow.
If you want haftacha, you have to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. he shows up in the middle of the night, he comes to the Rebbe, and he comes and he asks the Rebbe for a bracha, then haftacha, he gets his haftacha, and the Rebbe says, what's the Torah that's currently the Rebbe speaking? And so he said he just made a siyum, and he quoted the famous Gemara that, afilu poishe Yisrael malei mitzvahs kirimain. Even the greatest sinners of Klal Yisrael are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate is filled with seeds. So the Rebbe said, no. So he said, he asked, Eizene kasha, klotz kasha. If the Gemara calls them Paishe Yisrael, sinners of the sinners, and the Mazid, according, how could the Gemara say they're filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate is filled with seeds? And the Sat Mechasa tells this Lubavitch Shliach, the Rebbe's face grew white, and he starts to cry. And he said, I learned the same Gemara, and I have the opposite question. If the Gemara says this Yid is filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate is filled with seeds, how can the Gemara call this Yid, label them Paishe Yisrael?
Wow.
So we all learn the same Gemaras, but the question is how, what's the knetch? What's the knetch? And in this regard, I think the Rebbe gave Am Yisrael such a gift, and we're seeing it manifest in so many of the amazing movements from meaningful people to, thank you Hashem, Yiddishkeit is a new Yiddishkeit. Nothing has changed and everything has changed. It's a matter of the knetch, the duggage.
We're seeing a lot of the things that you're saying that are bleeding outside of Chabad, which is 100%. Awesome. Like, bring up Rabbi Kalish again, but if you ever dare, and I had this spending Pesach with him and we were on panels together, I was asking him questions. But if you were to ever talk down about a Yid in front of Rabbi Kalish, that's one way guarantee that you're going to get.
There you go.
And that
100%.
Yeah.
That's there was a story, there's a Shliach in London, Rabbi Lou. He once mentioned that he met somebody who told him that there was a young man he saw putting tefillin on with someone who it seems wasn't tefillin, someone who put on regularly. And he said, this must be a Lubavitcher. So Rabbi Lou shares the story with the Rebbe, I guess assuming the Rebbe would take great nachas in hearing that putting tefillin on another Yid, that's signature Chabad. Listen to the Rebbe's reaction. The Rebbe said, Ich wart for the tug. I wait for the day that when one Jew puts tefillin on another Jew, we no longer say this must be a Lubavitcher. If you know anything about the Rebbe's Hanhaga and Hadracha, you will know one thing, that the Rebbe was not about the brand. It was not about the monopoly. To the contrary, the Rebbe hoped for the day that all of these amazing teachings that he always said come from the Eilik, the Baal Shem Tov, and beforehand, that they proliferate to such a degree that every Yid feels the responsibility, the arevos, to put tefillin on with another. Then you're seeing that. You're seeing that now, time and again, all the mitzvahs during after October 7th, the tzitzis and tefillin. Today, it's so ubiquitous, it's so widespread, and that is giving the Rebbe's neshama tremendous nachas to my mind.
Amazing. So, positivity bias, on purpose, attempt to heal.
Well, on purpose is the new one.
Yeah, we're going to get to but positivity bias is probably, to date, your most popular and widespread work.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I'll be very honest, it really surprised me. I'm not saying this, maybe sometimes...
Doesn't sound so positive.
No, I'll explain to you why. First of all, someone once in an interview asked me, no, you must be a tremendously positive person. It must be a joy to live with you.
Yeah, but you do seem pretty positive. Like, you smile a lot, No?
I appreciate that. By the way, just as a parenthesis, Rabbi Krinsky once asked the Rebbe, because there was some media, he took care of the media for Lubavitch. And he said a particular publication is asking for a picture of the Rebbe. He says, which picture should I put in? This is a very interesting story. Yeah. Ask the Rebbe which picture what's your favorite picture? So the Rebbe said, the Rebbe said, it should be one where I'm smiling. Because what the Rebbe understood was it's time for the Jewish people to see a rabbi that smiles. Yeah. Rabbis were associated always with a harshness and judgment. The Rebbe said, a smiling rabbi. That's where we are. So Seeds of Wisdom was the first book that I wrote. It's a series. They're very short anecdotes, very, very, very powerful, condensed or distilled stories, each with a message and a one-liner at the bottom. That went very, very well. It went through 10 or 12 prints.
That's awesome.
Close to 40,000 sold to the first volume, which is a lot for a Jewish book. Again,
was your first book also?
My first book. I was anyways, it went. I clearly touched the chord. But I thought after that the success came from the format. Short stories, one-liners. This is the 144 character generation. But positivity bias was so deep. It was actually started off when I was a Bach in Yeshiva, and I started to learn the Rebbe's Torah. And I started to see how under so many circumstances and occasions, the Rebbe did what I would call reconstructive surgery on so many of the personalities from Tanakh and from Torah. And now's not the time. Maybe we do a different session entirely on the Rebbe's Torah as it pertains to the infamous, villainous, terrible individuals, events, and characters throughout Torah. And I started to see a pattern.
It's an amazing chapter, by the way.
Yeah, I'm in.
But that's just, I have to tell you, for everything I included, I left out, there are probably 80, 90 examples. It's really amazing. And you have to see, there's a video where the Rebbe speaks about Miriam Bas Bilga. If you have to see one video, the Rebbe.
Who?
Miriam Bas Bilga, character from the Gemara.
Could you tell me more about her?
By the way, this is Nachi's Indian. I don't know if you know this about Nachi.
That's my favorite thing.
Nachi loves a lot of things. One of the things that Nachi loves is finding characters from either the time of Tanakh or the time of the Talmud.
Yeah,
I'm gonna love this.
Like little known characters.
You're gonna love this.
This is my candy shop.
Look, let's get back to it. It's a bigger discussion, and it's amazing. But the short of it is, the way I put it is, the Rebbe engaged in intergenerational pidyon shvuya. Think about that for a moment. Intergenerational pidyon shvuya, because there's a concept. Okay. If we have a few minutes.
Wait, so you're not going to tell me about it?
Okay, I'll tell you about it.
Okay, you are.
Here's the essence of it.
We are now in a brackets within a parenthesis.
I gotta know who she's
Open brackets
Miriam
within
Bas
the
Bilga?
parentheses.
Bilga, yeah. We'll come back to we'll hold cup.
You'll bring us back.
Yeah.
So,
Miriam.
So Miriam lived during the time, the very difficult time for Am Yisrael. It was right around the time of Churban, and she converted out of Judaism, and she married a general. She married an anti-Semitic general, and actually she was there during the time that the actual Beis Hamikdash was engulfed in flames. She took her sandal, she went over to the Mizbeach, and she beat the Mizbeach, and she screamed out "Lukus, Lukus," which means wolf, wolf. You eat their offerings, and you abandon them in their time of need. And she becomes, therefore, classically speaking, a symbol of the furthest lengths, the furthest, reaches a Jew might go, the cardinal lines a Jew might cross beyond which there's no return. And her whole group were actually punished because of her, and the ring that was designated for their family in the Beis Hamikdash was removed. It's a long story, but that's the essence of it. Okay, that's the story
on the surface.
On the surface, the Rebbe says like this. From Miriam Bas Bilga, we actually learn that oile rasha, oile shchena. Woe is to the person who has bad neighbors. So Rebbe says, in the fact that we learn out halacha from this woman, it must be there's a yesoidir magagal and schus la'idei zakai, that there's something here good and positive we have simply overlooked. And the Rebbe unpacks it at this point, and he begins to talk about the times in which she lives, and he goes into what she did, and then he says, okay, all of that is true. But then when she's standing, as it were, face to face with the Eibishter at the Mizbeach, what comes out of her? She says, Lukus, Lukus, Mizbeach, you took their offerings, and where are you for Am Yisrael in their time of need? She becomes a poster girl for the Yiddish Imam.
She's giving a cry to Eibishter.
She's calling out that was deeply embedded within her. Everything else was the superficial. And what was the real Miriam? The real Miriam was this terrible cry of pain.
That was the Pintaliyah.
That was the Pintaliyah right there. Now listen to this. I'm telling you a postscript that many people don't know. I didn't include in Positivity Bites because
there's a scoop. We got a scoop.
There's a scoop here. I'll tell you why. Because the audience is much wider than the Hamish Olam, right? And certain things belong to the Hamish Olam for whatever reason. Yeah, the Rebbe got a lot of criticism for that part. Even within
too positive, it was taking something that was
much.
Really.
They felt it was too much.
Went too far.
You're completely reframing. We understood her this way, and this is how the Gedolim and Nachrainim understood her. In other words, like Verbista, who are you to come and try to, re-represent her in such light, rehabilitate her image? Okay, so the Rebbe says like this. It was actually the Rebbe said that Sicha on Vav Tishrei, which is his mother's Yahrzeit. On Shabbos Bereishis, the Rebbe comes back to it. The Rebbe says, I received some strong criticisms. The Rebbe says, first and foremost, I don't need to justify limit chus. Since when does it yet have to justify limit chus? Okay, then the Rebbe goes into like this. The Rebbe says, I'm going to share a story. You could see it, it's all there in the print. The Rebbe shares a story about the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was once sitting, and suddenly they brought before him a person who was possessed by a dibuk. A dibuk is a soul that's trapped. It's a soul that has not yet begun its healing journey because it did something so terrible. It can't even begin the healing. And what happens is sometimes it attaches itself to a person in this world. So they bring this person possessed by a dibuk to the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe says a Torah. The Rebbe talks about the murderers of Zechariah. And he says that why did this particular murderer take part in this heinous crime? Because he was aware of the fact that a nevuah, as long as it's not spoken into the world, doesn't necessarily have to come about. But once it's brought into the world, it's verbalized, it's manifested through dibur, which creates davar, creates reality, it has to happen. So this individual knew that Zechariah was going to prophesy about the Churban, and in order to avoid and to hopefully stop the Churban from taking place, he killed Zechariah. That's a radical Shlichus. And the Dibuk left the person. The Talmidim were absolutely shocked by the story, and they say, my high. So he says, who do you think the neshama was trapped was? So that was the end of the story. The Rebbe didn't continue. He didn't continue. So again, my speculation is that the neshama of Miriam Bas Bilga was trapped for thousands of years until the Rebbe gave her Limud.
Wow.
I don't understand the context.
That's the pidyon shvuim.
That's the point.
Wow.
In other words, the Rebbe's Avos Yisrael didn't just extend to every Yid who lives in our time, but in a certain sense, Rebbe's Avos Yisrael extended to every Yid who lived at any time.
Wow.
Going back as it were intergenerational pidyon shvuim, redeeming those captive souls who could know no peace.
Wow.
Again, it's my speculation, but if you look at the actual Sikha, the Rebbe is literally responding to the critique about Miriam Bas Bilga, and he shares a story about the Alter Rebbe in a Dibuk. Okay, take it or leave it.
It's a moira to get tight.
Now you see why I didn't include it.
Yeah.
it's
I'm glad you included it here. Yeah. We'll be right back to this episode. A quick word from my friends at Rothenberg Law Firm. Yes, Rothenberg Law Firm have been in this business for 55 years. Accidents happen. Nobody likes them. But when they do, you need to be prepared. Who do you call? Well, first, probably Hatzalah, get yourself taken care of. But after that, you're going to call Rothenberg Law Firm. Rothenberg Law Firm. Yes, you've been driving on the BQE. You've been driving on Rockaway Turnpike. You've been driving in the city and you see the billboards. Rothenberg Law Firm. That is the go-to law firm to represent you. They don't get paid unless you get paid. So make sure if you're ever in a situation where an accident happens, workers' compensation, negligence, anything in those categories, you go ahead and reach out to Rothenberg Law Firm. That is injurylawyer.com. You have a case that maybe you think should be heard, head to injurylawyer.com and get your free case evaluation today only at Rothenberg Law Firm. Injurylawyer.com. Hanukkah is right around the corner and you want to be getting the most amazing gift for your kids. That is from J Karaoke. Yes, get your kids singing the songs, the right songs, the Jewish songs, maybe from the 90s, maybe from the 80s, maybe from 2 weeks ago. All the amazing songs are on J Karaoke. It's an amazing mic. Like you see, I'm holding it right now. If you're watching a video, you see this mic. Beautiful. It works really well. I love it. My kids love it. It comes with an awesome machine as well. Make sure you head to J Karaoke's website, hit the link in the show notes below, and get this for your home. You could practice those harmonies. You could learn the rhythm. You could actually, when did that kid decide that he's going to be a singer in life? When he got J Karaoke. How about that? Yaakov Shweki, Avram Fried, maybe they started out in J Karaoke, or maybe not because it didn't exist then, but maybe the future singers in this world will have started on J Karaoke. You can mention code JKMinute. That is JKMinute for 15% off the merchandise you purchase. That is JKMinute promo code for 15% off the merchandise that you purchase. Get the gift from J Karaoke.
I want to dial it back one layer within the brackets, within the parentheses, just dialing it back one level. That's a moiridigly deep explanation. But if you examine just the actual inyan, which is that at our core, we are a chelik alakami mal mamish. And like the Balatanya says, that every yid is that. And there is no fragmentation at our core. We are one truly. And any fragmentation is only a function of our physical embodiment and lavush in this world. But at our core, we are one mamish. Then it really doesn't matter what the person did. Meaning, if you take the Rebbe's mission and his perspective on every yid to the nth degree, then it is by its definition impervious to the physical actions of the person.
No, I actually disagree here because I think we could distinguish.
I love a disagreement.
I think we could distinguish. Here I think let's touch on a very obvious and it's a very prevalent misconception. That sometimes there were Gedolim who felt that we have to curtail Chabad, the Rebbe, because he's going too far with this Amos Yisrael thing, that perhaps this might convey to those who are not yet from or Shemer Term
that you could stay not from and
you're
you'll be
loved,
loved.
unconditional love, and so forth.
People say now today, anyways. Yeah, well, thank you Hashem also. No, it's not. Sometimes, what do you mean? Whatever. Yeah, go on.
So for that you really
Good
have
restraint, Nachi. Good restraint.
Yeah, no, I wasn't restraining. I don't restrain. You want? I'll give it to you all.
Yeah, for that you have to know a thing or two about the Rebbe's Yireh Shamayim Frumkeit. And there's tens and tens of stories of how the Rebbe got very intimately involved with individuals and spoke very directly to their Shmir Satar mitzvahs. It's the essence and the theme of so many of the Rebbe's letters. There was no equivocation. Here's the way, in my view, the Rebbe saw the dynamic here. There's an essence, but that essence could be hidden, could be concealed. A person could live an entire lifetime unaware of that essence. It's like, unfortunately, sometimes, I'll share with you an amazing story. One Ne'ilah, after Ne'ilah, a person comes over to me, says, I was so moved by your words. I said, I never saw you before here. I'm so happy you're with us. He said, yeah, he's an Italian producer. He was raised Catholic. His mother, his father were devout and prominent in their church. He used to attend church every Sunday. He said, the past 6 months, 7 months, my mother her mind started to decline. She has Alzheimer's. She started to speak a language we don't understand. It's not Italian. It's not English. He said, we did a little research and we found out that she's speaking Yiddish.
Can we have him on the podcast? What's his name? We got to listen. We're going to get that guest.
Think about Yiddish. So we started to do due diligence, research, and we found out that she was the daughter of Holocaust survivors. And they had made a decision. Exactly. Thank you. And they had made a decision to live to completely disconnect from Jewish history, Jewish identity because of its perceived danger. And she went the other way. She married a Christian, and that's how I was raised. So think about that for a moment. Here's a woman who, in all of her conscious life, from a certain point onward, chose a certain identity, presented to the world and to herself, this is me. And then when the construct, as it were, was dismantled due to deterioration of old age, her essence came through. So what's Torah and Mitzvahs? Torah and Mitzvahs is the Eibish's gift to help us align our conscious selves with our essence, our essential selves. Every time you do a mitzvah, essentially you align your conscious and your unconscious. That's what a mitzvah is. It's tafsa v'chibur, and not just a commandment. That's true too. It's also a point of connection. So that's what all of Shlichus is really essentially. Let's distill it into what it is. It's the greatest act of Ahavas Yisrael. It's going to places and to people and to environments which have chosen a specific identity and said, this is what we are, this is what I am, this is who we are, and is gently and kindly helping create that paradigm shift where the person begins to see their essences differently and then hopefully lives in alignment with that essence. So I hope that...
But I don't think then we are disagreeing. I think we are...
No, I think you are, actually. It took 2.5 years for someone to disagree with you. Yeah.
I don't want to disappoint Nachi, but I think we are not disagreeing.
Right.
What I'm illustrating is that the defense of Miriam Bas Bilga is not any more objectionable just because all of the construct of her life.
Now I understand what you're asking, and I appreciate that you clarified that. Yeah. So there's a saying that people tend to judge others by their actions and themselves by their intentions. Mm-hmm. So the way I would put it is that in all of these stories, the Rebbe judged others or viewed others through their intentions.
Or even beyond their intentions.
Yes, but let's be absolutely clear. There's no doubt that the action was terribly misguided.
Of course.
The conversion out, there is no greater sin. Participating in the Churban, marrying an anti-Semite, these are all in and of themselves things that are not redeemable. But here's what the Rebbe is saying. They don't reflect the essence of Miriam. And that essence came out at the Mizbech when she had her one-on-one with the Eibishter, as it were. So we have to be absolutely clear. All of those things are deemed, both in halacha and in ashkafa, all of the actions we can evaluate as being mistakes. They were misguided
You're saying
actions.
Had she been in there, in the Beis HaMikdash, and she still would have done something that really wasn't the essence, the Rebbe wouldn't have said this. But because...
Correct. Because then he would have believed it.
Is there someone in history that we know of as a Jew?
But your hypothetical, I just want to double click on that. Yeah. That hypothetical is by its very terms impossible.
Right.
Because she was Jewish.
That's the point.
So you're assuming away in your hypothetical construct the reality, which is that she was a Yid.
Right. So back to Nafshi.
Whether or not that essence would have revealed itself in that moment, her essence is still there. The Rebbe just found its revelation in that moment.
In her case, we have a clear reference a clear revelation of her essence. But had she not expressed herself in that way, and had she done something, it still would have been the case, because that's the Metzias. By the way, let me share with you something very important.
Okay.
The Rebbe, whenever someone would talk to the Rebbe and talk about the Rebbe's Chidushim, the Rebbe would downplay Chidushim. The Rebbe said, I'm not here to be Mechadish. To the contrary, the Rebbe would made it such an important emphasis of his Torah to always footnote things. You don't have this very much in the Gedolei Acharayim, that all of their words, their sources. Look at every Likutei Sichos, every Mimer, and there was a whole team working on Marmar Komis. What was the point? First of all, the Rebbe had, let's be honest, the Rebbe had an academic background. He was at the Sorbonne, he was at, so he took some of the great things of the academia. You say something, you got to say where it comes from. Citations. But I think there's something more at hand. I think what the Rebbe was trying to do, he was trying to show how everything he's saying is rooted in classic Torah, and traditional Torah in the Messiah. So the Rebbe quoted very, very often.
No hot takes.
What?
Not a hot take. It's
not some new age thing. Like Chabad
wasn't clickbait.
We didn't create a focus group and said, okay, what do people want to hear in 2024? That's not what this is about. This is about pure Torah as it's applied in modern times. Okay, so the Rebbe quoted the Rambam, and the Rebbe said many times, this is the Rambam in Sefer Hayad, which is a Sefer Halacha. Okay, this is not the Menorah. This is not philosophy. In Sefer Halacha, the Rambam brings a halacha that if there's a person who actually is required to give a get according to halacha, but chooses not to, we know this is one of the few examples of
enforcement mechanisms.
Thank you very much. I have to be very careful. Enforcement mechanisms. There was a group of people who their job was koifin oiseh achiyem reitzani. They would force out of him the words reitzani. So the Rebbe asks the obvious question. The Rambam touches on this. The halacha regarding get is that it has to actually be biratzin. Now, if it came biratzin, this guy would not need to be beaten to a pulp. So the fact that you need to have enforcement is the biggest proof that it's not biratzin. So was helped mir? Has it helped that he's saying the words reitzani? And then the Rambam says in Sefer Halacha Navaden, and he says over there that because the essence of a Yid is to do the will of Hashem, be'etzem, this is his ratzon. And the fact that he is manifesting against this ratzon, that's the superficial. That's the superimposed. That's not the essential. And therefore, his words, when he's spoken, reitzani, even if it came through coercion, are reflecting his essence. And in this way, he's come into alignment. So that, I think, is a very powerful yesod. That was actually a very good question. Had she acted differently,
thank you,
would the Rebbe
don't worry, babe, who never said that to me.
What?
Thank you.
Yes. Had she done something different, would the Rebbe have derived something different from it? And the answer is no. He just wouldn't be able to show how in her case this was the truth. And interestingly, actually, now that I remember it, in the Sikha, the Rebbe says that that's why we are told this story. That too is the Hira. That from her we learn that the essence of a Yid is
on this Kofen Oiseh Hashem Reitzani, the enforcement mechanism, bringing out, revealing, expressing the true will and the true essence. I heard a Meirdig Torah once. I'll try to say it quickly. 40 is the number that always is indicative of a birth or a rebirth process.
Yeah.
Every time you see the number 40, Mem Yem Kodim L'Tziras Havlad, and there's 40 saw in the mikvah. And 40 is always... The Mabul was a 40-day and 40-night process. When Moshe Rabbeinu was on Har Sinai, the Chazal say that the world thought it was another Mabul. Why? Because it was raining? No, because the world was experiencing that rebirth. The world after the Torah was given was a whole new world. And 40 is always that number. So Malchus are 40. It's called by the Gemara, Malchus Arboim. There's 40 Malchus. But are there though?
Right.
Because it's really 39 Malchus.
Right.
It's a 39, which is a process of 40. It's a rebirth. You're re-energizing, you're revitalizing the person from their past with this 40 Malchus process, but it only takes 39 lashes. And why? Because when you get to that 40th layer, you've gotten down to that reitzani, you've gotten down to that core, that chelik alakami mal mamish. It's a process of 40, but when you get down to that last layer, that doesn't need any rectification. It's chelik alakami mal mamish, and it's pristine, it's intact. So it's a process of 40, but it only takes 39. And the 40 days from Rosh Chodesh El to Yom Kippurim is a 40-day rebirth process. And I think I heard, the fact checkers will check it, I think Reitzani might be B'gematria Yom Kippurim, which is that 40th layer.
Is it?
Kofen Oiseh Acha
I
and
don't know
Reitzani.
I have to do the math.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're a genius.
But by the way,
That's
it's
beautiful.
very powerful. And Alter Rebbe has a whole mimer saying that that's why the mob was 40 40 days, because the Mabul was essentially the world being toivel, being submerged in a mikveh. It was also an act of purification and rehabilitation. It's very powerful.
The 400 years in Mitzrayim also I heard is
interesting.
The whole number construct, it really only caps out at 10. So 40 is 4 times the 10. And for the nation of Klal Yisrael to be born, it says that we were a nation within the nation in Mitzrayim, and we had to be born out of Mitzrayim. So that was a 400-year process because it was a national rebirth.
And we have 40 years in the desert, also in the Midbar. That's very powerful. So yeah, I think, look, I think there's, to some people there was a Rambam, but to the Rebbe this was a map. This was the way to decode a Yid. And I think linking it back to the original sources was something very important to the Rebbe, to show that it's not hyperbole, it's not poetry, it's reality. Go back to.
I never knew how to pronounce that word, by the way.
Hyperbole?
That's how you say it?
Yeah.
I've always read it.
What?
That word, I never knew how to pronounce it.
You read it? What do you mean?
I've seen it written, so I've read it, but I've never heard it pronounced. I'm just being real with you right now.
Moment of silence for that, Momo. Hey, yes, we'll be right back to this episode of the podcast. Quick word from my friends at nrspay.org. You know, just last week at the Knesset Shlichim, and I ran into somebody, Eli Katz. He is the owner of NRS Pay. Yes, the most reliable, the most honest credit card processors in the business. All you got to do is you got a business. You don't want those hidden fees. You don't want those long-term contracts. You don't want to operate like you feel like someone is squeezing your neck and all of a sudden there's fees coming from all over the place just because you're trying to charge credit cards. It doesn't need to be that way. Head to nrspay.com. That is nrspay.com. NRS Pay is the honest credit card processing system. Part of IDT, public company, a great reputation. So go to nrspay.com and find out how they can be perfect for your business. They have amazing flat rate deals for you. They have amazing programs for you. nrspay.com is the company that you should choose to be partners in your business. This isn't an episode of the Meaningful People podcast unless we mention our friends at Tavito.com. See, it's Hanukkah season and your kids are asking, hey, can we watch this? Can we watch that? It's Hanukkah. We're off from school. And you're going to say, no. No, it's Hanukkah. It's like a Yontif. Come on. And then they're going to say, hey, can you get us Tavito? What are you going to say then? You're going to say yes. You're going to say yes because I have promo code MM10 for 10% off. And also Tavito has the content that I can actually trust my kids to watch. I can believe that it's right. It's content like McGillis Lester. It's content like Frady Katz, The Royal Rescue, Kivi and Tukey, things that maybe you grew up listening to now and pictured. Now you can watch it. Tavito.com is an incredible service for our community, for our children. And it's amazing content, stuff that we can put on and we could trust that these values that are being pushed in this world are not being pushed on Tavito.com. The stuff that we believe in and we trust and that we value are being taught. That is at Tavito.com. Make sure to use promo code MM10. That is MM10 for your 10% off. Maybe buy a gift card on that homepage of that website. You can have the option to buy a gift card. Be that uncle, be that aunt, be that cousin. Go ahead and buy a gift card for your children, for your nieces, for your nephews, for your friends at Tavito.com. Before we wrap up, tell us a little bit about this new book, On Purpose.
Okay. So
did you write it on purpose?
Are you a dad?
Yes.
Okay, but I'm just confirming. Because that was a dad joke.
So,
L'chaim.
L'chaim Levracha.
Coffee, for the record.
Cold meat, hot cups, Meal Mart. Yeah, On Purpose.
So, you know, there's a lot of things that brought me to this particular book, but I think one of the strong things is that every generation, every period of history has its unique challenge. And the Rebbe once diagnosed our generation. This was a diagnosis he gave in 1950, right? As he became the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He said that the overarching challenge and struggle of this younger generation will be the sense of inadequacy. Mi ani uma ani. Who am I? What am I? Do I really matter? I think that's actually a brilliant and prophetic statement, given that only over the course of decades later would the self-esteem movement and all of that begin to emerge and flower. And today, I think it's a very prevalent theme amongst a lot of young people. You know, we live in this big world, this hyper interconnected world. What difference can I make? You know? And so the Rebbe actually, I think one of the gifts he gave to Am Yisrael was a profound, deep sense of empowerment. You know, he was once speaking to Mashpia, Rabbi Garari, who was starting his career as it were, and he told the Rebbe, I know a lot of the stories of Hasidim and the Tzaddikim, but what theme should I articulate? What should become my, as it were, central message? And the Rebbe quoted a different Rambam. Which Rambam? Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva. A person should always see the world as equally balanced between good and evil. Asa mitzvah achas harehi chriya es atzme bes kol ha'olam kule lekav zechus v'garam loi v'lahem tshua v'hatzala. That all it requires to tip the scale, not just of his own individual life, but of the world at large, and in fact, history itself, is one single act of goodness, one proper choice that reflects his chelek aleka mimal. That was the Rebbe's message again and again. It's written into every page, every encounter, every yechidus. This, I think, is what the Rebbe sought out to achieve, especially after the Azay Gerufna, the so-called Holocaust, when Am Yisrael was so demonized and dehumanized and stripped of its sense of agency and determination and value and dignity and so on. And what does the Rebbe do just after that? He takes that generation, who are the early Shlichim, survivors, and he turns them into the most powerful global task force and purpose-driven group of dedicated to sharing the light and the love of the Eibusher with every Yid wherever they go in the world. And how did he do this? So he did this through Torah. He did this through Torah. You know, I would say that, how do you really get to know someone very well? Which room do you go to in their home? You go to their library. Even better, you go to their room and you look at their night table and you see what book is on their nightstand. Mm-hmm. And then you open the book and you see which passages are underlined. Or, you know, those sticky notes? What are the sections of the book they come back to again and again and again? And I think the same could be said for Gedolei Yisrael. In other words, all Gedolei Yisrael were reading out of the same book. The question is, what are the passages they come back to again and again and again? And if you analyze those, you get to learn and understand a much deeper perspective on who this tzaddik is and what is his unique contribution to Am Yisrael and to Jewish history. And so for the Rebbe, there are so many divrei Chazal that resurface and come again and again. But I would say in this context, what one scholar called the Rebbe's motivational theology, there were a few central ideas that the Rebbe shared, a few points the Rebbe would say. One of them was this Rambam that I just shared with you. Another one is, Kalamatzel nafesh achas, he who saves even one life is as if they saved the entire world. And another one is, Lafichach nivra adam yechidi, therefore humankind was created as a single unit rather than in pairs. Why? So that a person should say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, that the world was created for me. Mind you, at face value, that sounds like the most narcissistic new age mantra out there. The world was created for me. Sadly, some people take it literally, that everyone is there to serve them. But the Rebbe went so deep with this Chazal. And the Rebbe said, according to the Mekubalim, before neshama comes into this world, it is given chelkai ba'olam. Each one of us has a portion of this world that's uniquely ours to elevate, to nurture, to shepherd, to touch, to illuminate. That's the olam we're referring to over here. Every one of us is indispensable. That is to say, no neshama before us or after us can achieve the mission for which our neshama comes to this world. So much so we all know about Gilgulim. If our neshama does not complete its mission, it's not transferred to somebody else. We don't say, okay, that's it. We send you right back because your chelik ba'olam has not yet been completed. The netzutzos, to use the language of the Arizal or Kabbalah, the sparks that have your name on them have not been elevated. That is such an empowering idea, which has been widely spread. There's a one-liner. Someone asked me, how do you encapsulate the whole book in one line? If I were to do so, and by the way, very interesting, if you think about it, Pirkei Avos is the original book of sound bites. Essentially, everyone's being asked, give me the one line, your favorite line, your favorite teaching. Every line is an entire book. That's a book. But they put it into one line. So how do we put on purpose into one line? It's a line that's sometimes attributed to Rabbi Nachman. I've yet to see the source in Rabbi Nachman's Torah, like these words. And by the way, it's attributed also to the Rebbe in these words, and it's not literal, but it's definitely a paraphrase that comes from so many of the Rebbe's Torah, that the day you were born is the day the Eibusher decided the world can't exist without you. And this is something the Rebbe took extremely literally. There's so many stories in the book that demonstrate this idea, but the idea is that each one of us has chelka ba'olam. So how do we discover what's our particular chelka ba'olam? Here too, the Rebbe has a very powerful idea. It's based on a letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe, If it's okay, I'll read a portion of it. That becomes the central premise and thesis behind this book, and we'll see that the Rebbe elucidated and elaborated on this tremendously. The essential idea here is that very often we tend to think of purpose in very grand and global sweeping terms. We think of purpose-driven people as people who change history, right? The Rebbe has a very different perspective. You could probably encapsulate it by saying, the Rebbe taught, ask not how I can change the world, ask how I can change my world. Okay? So how do we learn about our individual purpose? So the Friedrich Rebbe wrote a letter to a chassid named Tzvi Kogan, and he asked the Friedrich Rebbe to share his purpose in life. And he writes like this. This is so beautiful. The Torah states, Zeh Sefer Toldos Adam. This is a book that recounts the offsprings of Adam Arishon. But the Hebrew word Toldos, offspring, could also read as a life story. So the life story of a person is a book that he must study. That book must be a guide for the person's life. Toldos Adam can also be translated as a person's birth. Okay, so in other words like this, you want to know your purpose in life? Study yourself. Look inside yourself. So often we think, I need to find the perfect guide, the perfect guru, the best course, the best book, other than on purpose. No, I'm saying because this is the Divrei Chazal, but otherwise, I need to find my purpose outside of myself. But really, what we're being taught here is, and the Friedrich Rebbe spells it out, here it means like this. He lists 10 criteria to help you find your purpose in life. Number 1, to whom this person was born. Into which family? Who is your family? That's A. In which place this person was born, your location. This is a very central theme in the Rebbe's Torah. Where you are, that's where you need to be, and that's where you need to make a difference. In what time, in what generation you were born. What kind of upbringing and chinuch a person had. The kind of environment he grew up in. What talents this person has. What kind of natural character traits one has. What kind of hobbies and interests one has. What kind of hashgacha pratis guided the person until he became self-directed and took a stand in life. Taken together, these 10 things compose the life of a person. They form a book that the person must study and then choose to follow in all of their affairs, both in their relationship with Hashem and others. This 10-point guide provides a comprehensive framework for discerning how each part of your inner world and personal circumstances are divinely imparted to help you identify and fulfill your mission in life. In other words, put simply, there's the internal and there's the external. Internally, it's things like your personality, your talents, your passions. Why is one person passionate about chinuch? Another person's passionate about agunas. Another person's passionate about kashrus. Every person has their passions. So that's because the Eibusher built into your inner composition an indicator, a divine clue as to where your purpose lies. The same for a talent. There it's a little more obvious. We each have different talents. And the same is true also of struggles. Why do I struggle with this particular inyan or this area and you don't? Sometimes you get together with a friend and you don't understand him, he doesn't understand you, because the things he finds difficult, you find easy, and vice versa. Why do you struggle in this area? So naturally we tend to think, that's my weakness. What are we told? That's your strength.
That's your calling.
That's your calling. That spiritual struggle and pain is actually an invitation. It's an arrow pointing right there. That's where your particular shlichus lies. Even, the Rebbe said, even your mistakes, this is a big idea, even your mistakes are part of your purpose. That's very difficult sometimes to swallow, because if bechira chavshis means I have free will, I could choose wrong. Maybe I'll share, if we have a few minutes, I'll share a story about some of these points so we can see them come to life, because in the abstract, it's
just want to say something on the tshuva, on the mistakes. I think it's the Baal Tanya, maybe at the end of Perek Lamed Aleph, he talks about how tshuva is the restoration of the person to their core, to their essence.
Yeah, tashuv hey, he says.
Yeah, so that can only be revealed through 100%. Tshuva, through one's mistakes.
Yes. And okay, so let me share a little bit. So first of all, let me share with you a story about talent. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lipsker family in Crown Heights. There's a musician, his name was Eli Lipsker. He passed away a few years ago, but he was when he was a student, he was Talmud in Lubavitch Yeshiva. He used to play music enthusiastically as a hobby. And at some point, the school administrators found out that he had some extracurricular musical hobbies. He was actually studying at the Juilliard School of Music in Manhattan.
That's legit.
Yeah, and they actually were, I think he might have even skipped yeshiva. So before a bacher was sent away, they had to get permission from the rabbi at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think they should still do that.
So they asked the Rebbe for, for his haskama. And the Rebbe said, not only should he not be kicked out, but the yeshiva should actually pay towards his musical education.
Gewalt.
Plot twist.
Rosh
Shiva thought he was doing something, huh?
And by the way, this is at an early time. Today, everyone says these kinds of things that, follow your talent and so on. But at the time, it was completely into that. You have to realize that. This Bacher would become eventually someone who the Rebbe referred to as my chazan, my musician. He used to have a children's choir. They played in the Hadlakas Neres in 770. And he used to lead tefillah during the Yom Neraim and so forth. The Rebbe saw that this is his talent. This is the Eibusher's way of saying, this is your instrument to play my music in the world. I didn't give you this talent for no reason, etc. There is a famous artist named Hanoch Lieberman. And it's a long story, but the short of it is, here's a quote from the Rebbe. Each person on this earth is allotted a task. You have a talent, use it. True, in the old days, painting was not considered an acceptable way to achieve this aim. But today it is. It is your way. Remember, art was always very controversial in the Hamish Olam because historically art was always pushing the envelope of morality, of decency, and so forth. And the Rebbe turns to this individual and says, the time has come to be ma'ala, to redeem those nitzutas within art. And he became a very well-known artist.
For the last time, we will be right back to this episode. A quick word from my friends at Town Appliance. Yes, now is Cyber Week, and the deals are here. You know what? Are you thinking about getting a new fridge? Yeah, maybe from Frigidaire. Well, how about you knock 31% off the price? Is that enough for you? How about now? Go to townappliance.com. The deals are going crazy. And if you don't have time to go on a website, or maybe you don't have a browser, just message them on WhatsApp and say, hey, what are your sales like? Sell me, pitch me, choose me, Town Appliance. And you'll get some good sales. Townappliance.com. Reach out to them today. Make sure you tell them that Meaningful People sent you. We're good buddies. We love working together. And Town Appliance will take care of you. The #1 appliance store in this world since 1979. So how about you choose them?
Challenges. Let's talk about challenges for a moment. This is something that's very special. So I know this story. I heard it from the person who it happened with, the Shliach. There was a Shliach in Antwerp. His name is Rabbi Shabtai Slavititsky. He's a very special man. And there was a gentleman who used to come to the shul from time to time, and he was getting the scarf. It was going very well. You know the story?
No.
And at some point, the guy stopped coming. Started ghosting, as we would say. He ghosted the rabbi, and that was it. At some point, the rabbi met him in the street or something. He said, what happened to you? Why don't we see you anymore? It was so nice. We got close. We were getting deep. He said, you don't understand. He said, I was going through such cognitive dissonance. He says, I am dating a non-Jewish girl. He says, I'm in love with her. He says, so at home, I had one life. Then I come to the Farbring, and I can't tell you, it stirred my soul in such a way that it made me experience such deep pain and angst by the time I got back home. I couldn't live in between these two worlds, so I chose the one over the other.
Wow.
So Rabbi Slavititsky says, listen, I think that to help you in this particular issue, I think you need to go see my teacher. So he sent him to the Rebbe. He comes by the Rebbe. I'm going to read to you some of the exchange. And he says to the Rebbe, he describes to the Rebbe as he walks by the Rebbe, I'm not here under false pretenses, so this is me. I'm currently dating a woman forbidden by the Torah. He was shocked. The Rebbe said 3 words. I envy you. What would go through your mind? You envy me? And then the Rebbe explained to him like this. There are many ladders in life. Each person is given his or her own ladder. The ladders present themselves as life's challenges and difficult choices. The tests you face are the ladders that elevate you to great heights. The greater the challenge, the steeper the ladder, the more difficult to climb. Hashem has given you this difficult test because he believes you can overcome it. And he's endowed you with the koiches to do so. Only the strongest are presented a ladder as challenging as yours.
Wow.
Don't you see then why I envy you?
Gewalt.
Think about that for a moment. What the Rebbe is doing is he's helping each one of us see our struggles. Sometimes if we could press delete on any part of our lives or personality or past experience, we'd have a long list. No, I don't know, present company excluded. But we all have those aspects of our personality or spiritual and moral struggles where if we
Control, Alt, Delete.
Everything?
Khalila.
Khalila.
Doesn't that delete everything?
So here,
reboots.
Oh, okay.
Reboot. But the answer to anything should be Khalila also. This is a very deep idea. Sometimes we turn to the Rebbe and say, enough is enough. How come I can't get rid of this particular Nisayan? It follows me around. My whole life I'm going to deal with this. Now, the Rebbe talks about in the Tanya, 3 most powerful words in Tanya, to my mind. Now, the Rebbe was talking to the Beinoni. What's the Beinoni? He's the constant struggler. He finally realizes this is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So he tells the Eibusha, what's happening? I can't deal with this long term. I thought I could outgrow it. I can graduate. So the Alter Rebbe says to him like this, 3 words. He says, Ulai lakach nivra. Because perhaps for this you were created. Unbelievable. To struggle, right? We look at struggle usually as the means to an end, and it's the
From Saraga.
Exactly. And here the Alter Rebbe is saying, this is it. So that's our struggles too. Sometimes it's become ad mitzvah nefesh. We can't stand it anymore. We can't stand ourselves or that part of ourselves anymore. What is the Rebbe teaching us? That part of you is perfectly designed. That's the Eibusha's way of saying, this is your tikkun. This is your avodah. I'm going to share with you a powerful idea about mistakes. So maybe you're familiar with Rabbi Lipsker from Bell Harbor?
Yeah.
He's a legend. He's a very special yid.
From Aleph?
Aleph.
Vada.
So what does Aleph do? Of course,
We met him, no?
We met him.
No, we met. You're talking about Rabbi Zalman. Rabbi
Actually,
Zalman?
his father,
Which one we meet?
Rabbi Shalom Ber.
So he was the shul.
Yeah,
Bel
he
Harbor.
is
met
the
the
founder.
current
He's senior.
CEO of
Senior.
Okay,
Aleph.
if you have a chance to
It's his
interview the
nephew,
father,
no? It's his nephew.
he has a nephew and a son working there.
We
If you-
interviewed Aaron. I think it's his nephew.
yeah,
Actually.
Aaron is his nephew. Salman,
Yeah.
I think, is his son. If you have a chance to interview him, it will be very worthwhile. So he once brought a group of prisoners to 770. How he did it's a long story. I mean, first of all, just before the Farbrengen, the Rebbe sent a message through Rabbi Groner to Rabbi Lipsker to spread out, that they shouldn't sit in one place. They should be spread out in 770. Masker comes to Rabbi Lipsker and says to spread out. Why? Because at a Farbrengen, most people look identical. So if you're going to have a group of people that look very different, people will start asking. It's human nature. Who is this group? And it's inevitable that someone's going to share that they're a group of prisoners, and the Rebbe said it shouldn't happen, that a yid should feel uncomfortable. You know? So, I'll tell you something I just remembered elsewhere. The Rebbe didn't even like to use the term Baal Tshuva. Why? Because when you call someone about Tshuva, essentially what you're doing is you're reminding them
Like they sinned.
that they sinned.
What do you call him?
A tzaddik in making.
Okay.
A potential tzaddik. But I'm saying, just think about that for a moment. So here the Rebbe didn't want them to be, outed, so to speak. So he said, let them be spread out. Listen to what the Rebbe shared on that at a later point to this group. The Rebbe talked about the concept of jail, about the fact that men and women who are incarcerated have a mission from Hashem that is extraordinary. Otherwise, Hashem would not put them in such a situation where they're in exile within an exile, a galus mitoich galus. And then he talked about the unique opportunities and mission that these men are on. In other words, in simple terms, while it's true that the cause of the individual's incarceration was related to crimes they committed, for which, yes, they were deserving of spending time in prison, let's not confuse cause with the reason. The reason that their neshamas were sent to this type of a place, whereas the Rebbe once pointed out, in Torah, you see, we don't have a concept of prison. There's no punishment of prison in Torah. Malchus, yeah, even Misa, but not prison. Why? Because what prison does is it strips you of the great gift that Hashem has given each one of us, which defines our humanity, which is Bechira Chavshis. And because in prison you are stripped of your freedom of mobility, freedom of choosing your time, and so on, that's why Torah would never mandate such a thing. So the Rebbe says, the Eibusha selected a few neshamas, and he sends them into this place of such despair and such darkness, because they have something they can achieve in that environment. They can bring hope, they can bring light. Think about that for a moment. And finally, there's a story of, let's say, moral or spiritual mistakes. This is a story that I don't think was published anywhere. So it's the first time it's being shared. It's a story that I had a hard time finding the source because it's such a sensitive story. But I wanted to make sure I heard it from the source. And I do want to thank Rabbi YY for helping direct me to the source with permission from the person who it happened to, who shared it with him. There's a whole way to deal with this. And I have to say a big thank you to Rabbi YY. Because when I struggle with different sources, I reach out to him. And if he knows it, he shares with me right away, sometimes within minutes. So it's tremendous credit. And I really appreciate it. So here's a woman who in the 70s went out on a mission searching for the meaning of life. And she ended up in the Far East. I have to share this story. Rabbi Kadlarski once introduced a balabas from Asia to the Rebbe and introduced him as coming from the Far East. The Rebbe said, you mean the place that's not close? The Rebbe didn't want to use the word far, just as a little brackets. So back to exactly right. So the Rebbe, this woman goes, she ends up getting involved in all kinds of things, including, bona fide, 100% authentic Avodah Zarah. And at a later point in life, she ended up in Crown Heights for whatever reason. And she ended up, her neshama sparked, was ignited. And at that point, she became absolutely devastated. In hindsight, or what kind of damage she did to her neshama. Not only had she not fulfilled her purpose in this world, in a certain sense, she had flagrantly violated the purpose of her neshama in this world. And so she wrote a letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe responded by quoting the famous Chazal that Yagaita v'lo matzasa al tamen, lo yagaita matzasa al tamen, yagaita matzasa tamen. That if a person says to you, I didn't work very hard, but I succeeded tremendously, don't believe him. If he said I succeeded, he said I worked very hard, but I didn't succeed at all, don't believe him. If he says I did work hard and I did succeed, then believe him. So the Rebbe says to her the following: since Yagati has definitely been fulfilled, certainly the promise of Matzasi has also been fulfilled. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. With this life-changing perspective, the Rebbe reframed this woman's time and energy spent in India as an integral part of the spiritual toil. The Agaiti, that was that which led her to the Matzasi, to finding the emes of Yiddishkeit. You see, before her encounter with the Rebbe, she may have viewed this period of her life as a wasted and irredeemable chapter that had corroded her soul and compromised her divine purpose. But from the Rebbe's perspective, this woman's initially misguided and fervent search for truth is what ultimately led her to earnestly embrace Yiddishkeit. In other words, without her profound drive to seek spiritual truth, however initially misdirected, she may well have lived a life of spiritual mediocrity and complacency, as many of her peers did, living this sort of superficial kind of Jewish Hava Nagila, Chomos, Am Yisrael Chai kind of Yiddishkeit. Not that that's a problem, but if that's everything, then she would never have gone deeper. But suddenly, because she had gone in that direction and she had been exposed to a certain earnestness, to a certain authenticity, she then brought that back with her to Yiddishkeit. So it's almost as if, as Rebbe said elsewhere, like a rubber band, the more you pull it back, the further it is propelled. So too, sometimes it's the very zdainis that, if rehabilitated, become nasim kezachias.
But Mendel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to need a part two.
Can I share a final story?
Final story.
A final story.
Yes.
Okay. I know there's so much, and thank you so much for having me. And Bez Hashem, I'm sure
we'll cross paths again.
So this is the takeaway for me, because so much of the book is obviously the Rebbe's teachings, but in a certain sense, we also learn from the Rebbe's living example. And there's an entire chapter called The Reluctant Rebbe, which talks about the Rebbe's own inner struggle, if you will, if you can call it that, to become a Rebbe. It's amazing how many times the Rebbe referred to himself as an introvert when he was encouraging someone else. I call that chapter the most extroverted introvert. You'll read it, you'll see it's very moving. There's a part where the Rebbe actually inspires the Baba Sali. There's a letter of the Baba Sali to the Rebbe, and he says, it's too much for me, this Askanis. You heard this?
He said, someone told us that the Baba Sali wanted to go live near the Rebbe and just give up where he was. And the Rebbe said, you have to stay.
Exactly.
You have to stay, serve the Sephardi Jews.
Exactly. And so there's a beautiful, beautiful back and forth. That's the kind. So there's a story where someone came. There's a businessman from London. His name was Freddie Hager. He came from the Hager Mishpacha dynasty of Rebbes. Vishnitz. And he came to the Rebbe and he brought a picture of his grandfather. And the Rebbe took the picture, and then the Rebbe said to him, do you know what a Rebbe is? So to my mind, this is the only time the Rebbe actually defines a Rebbe to someone else in, I think, language we can understand. He said no, thankfully. So the Rebbe explained. The Rebbe says the very first Rebbe was the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov had a minhag that he used to collect tzedakah for widows, for orphans during the day. He wouldn't go to sleep at night until every last kopek that he had collected was spent. The Rebbe said that's what a Rebbe is. In a different time, the Rebbe spoke to a man named Zalman Gordon, I'm sure related to you.
Sure.
A chassid, the big chassid, the Rebbe said to him that when he goes to sleep at night, before Kriya Shema, Shalamita makes a cheshbon hanefesh, and he asks himself, did I give everything I have to this day? What an amazing story. So here's the final story. I heard the story from Rabbi Kotlarsky, Alav Shalom. There was a Yid who needed something, and so he called up the secretariat of the Rebbe and he asked for a Yechidus, and they tell him, come back in 10 months at 4 a.m, one of those. And, he felt the need to speak to the Rebbe a little bit sooner, and he found out that there's a way to circumvent protocol. The Rebbe leaves his house every morning for 20 seconds till he gets to the car. If you can stand there and ambush the Rebbe, you have the Rebbe's undivided attention. So that's what he does. And the next morning he shows up, and he turns up, and he starts to speak to the Rebbe. 6-7 minutes, they exchange, and then the Rebbe finishes. The Rebbe goes to his car, he leaves, and he's very tzufridin. He got what he needed. That is until he saw 2 yeshiva bachrim from across the road charging at him They come at him and they start to rebuke him and admonish him. Hayitachen, how dare you take the Rebbe's time, steal the Rebbe's precious time? There's a system, etc. And they go on and on. He felt so terrible that he sat down and he wrote a note of apology to the Rebbe. He said, I'm terribly sorry that I stole of your time. The Rebbe responded with 2 points. Number one, the Rebbe said, the time that those yeshiva bachim accosted you was during Seder HaYeshiva. So you don't take them too seriously. What a beautiful little touch. And then the Rebbe says, and here the Rebbe quotes the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov has one of my favorite teachings, very radical idea. The Baal Shem Tov says that a neshama could come down into this world and spend an entire lifetime all in order to do just one favor for another. So your entire lifetime, 70, 80 years is part of the quote, but today, Baruch Hashem, closer to 90, and Mitzvah Hashem, 100, 120. All of it, all the Torah mitzvahs you might do could all be justified, all the tiltul hanefesh that your neshama experiences by being torn away from the Eibishter's presence and spend time in this dark and confused and broken world, all of it could be justified for one act of chesed. Says the Rebbe to this man, who knows? Perhaps my neshama came to this world for that conversation we had earlier today. And what's so amazing about that story is that the more you learn about the Rebbe, the more you see that that's how the Rebbe approached every encounter. Perhaps this is the one.
Perhaps this conversation here.
By the way, the Rebbe has a sikh where he uses those words, miyadeya. And so look, let's be real. I can talk for myself. I can't live with that level of purpose consciousness at every given moment and in every given encounter. But I think what all of us and perhaps the viewers can take from this is that we can each designate a time, a specific period of time every day, every week, every month, where we live with that heightened sense of purpose, where we recognize a deep hashkacha pratis in our internal makeup, but also in the events we interact and interface with, and recognize hashkacha in every moment such that we ask at any time and in every encounter, Eibishter, Eibishter, what would you have me say? What would you have me do in this moment in order to fulfill my purpose and bring the world to its intended place of Geula Shlema? Take it from Yad.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much for listening to watching this episode of the podcast. Boy, Rabbi Kalmanson, that was fire. Spit absolute fire in this episode. Make sure to leave a comment down below if you didn't already. If you're watching this now, here's your reminder. Leave a comment on YouTube down below and you can win a menorah from Rod and Flame. These menorahs are amazing. They are lit. Funny, lit, you get a fire. They're amazing menorahs and you're gonna wanna get one. So either you'll buy one or you'll win one. Those are your options. Comment below, maybe you'll win one, but if not, hit therodandflame.com. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, watching it. Rate it 5 stars, leave a comment, hit that subscribe button, because we got videos coming out all week. Shorts, videos, and you want to be up to date when that happens. So hit that subscribe button. We'll be back at you next week with another episode of the podcast. Until then, my friends, stay warm, stay safe, and have a great week.